driven.
Hello, everyone. This is a data-driven chat, and I'm very excited to have Fion Lee-Madan with us today. Fion is based in Canada. She's co-founder and chief operating officer at Fairly AI. Hello, Fion. How are you today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot for joining us today and finding the time. I know you're extremely busy. You are a marketing technologist turned startup funder. So can you tell us what does it mean? So what do you do? What is it that you do? And how did you get into marketing technology and being a startup funder? How did this happen?
Yes, of course. So I started my career 20 years ago as a tech consultant building e-commerce platform. And digital marketing wasn't even a thing back then. There was no Facebook, no Twitter. I was part of the first wave that helped build offshore offices in India, etc. So it was an exciting time. I specialized in a specific e-commerce platform called ATG. It was bought by Oracle in 2010 for $1 billion. Mm-hmm. But basically, I was on product side, client side, doing specialization with e-commerce. And that kind of carried me through for the last 20 years. And my role kind of morphed from being a full stack developer into the go-between translator between business stakeholders and technology stakeholders. And that is typically what a marketing technology does. We understand the tech, but we also understand the business, the requirements from marketing side. So for a large organization, I do the business requirement as well as some of the execution of end-to-end web campaigns. And in smaller organization, I help do both sides basically. Mm-hmm.
What an exciting career. So I don't think we had anybody who kind of started before like Facebook existed. That's awesome. So
I know, I feel so old.
No, I didn't mean that. I just meant must have been an exciting time with lots of opportunities at the time. So currently I feel there's so much noise in AI and the data-driven and tech-related industries. So there's so much available, so many new kind of companies. And, it probably was very exciting when there were just, few ideas around and, just looking at all this field developing must have been really, really cool.
Yeah, definitely. I do see a lot of parallel between the e-commerce industry in its early phase compared to where the AI industry right now. There was a lot of build versus buy decisions for companies that want to implement their e-commerce online channels. Right now, we are having that same type of discussion in AI, where we are like a lot of large companies who have the resources are building AI models in-house. But then we're seeing a lot of companies building, off-the-shelf AI products that with pre-trained models. And then the other parallel I see is that there's a lot of different terminology throwing around, and that's exactly how e-commerce was in the early space. There's no one defined category. People were trying to make their own definitions, and that's exactly what's happening in AI too. Like there's AI monitoring service, AI performance, AI lifecycle, like all these different kind of terms going around. So I feel like it's definitely an exciting time. I actually joined the industry before the internet bubble burst too. So that's another topic.
Wow. Okay. So tell us, how did you become interested in, first marketing technology and currently, in being a startup funder? That's probably also quite challenging. So can you tell us a little bit about your personal journey? So what drove you into kind of startup funding?
Yeah, to be honest with you, I was ready to retire 2 years ago. Like I've been specializing in e-commerce platform. It's now considered an outdated technology, what I was specializing in, to be honest. But then I tried retiring. I was volunteering at yoga studio, taking horse riding lessons because I have 2 young kids, but they are all in full-time school now. So I suddenly find myself have so much time. And then all these extracurricular activities, I kid you not, all of a sudden they all shut down. like the yoga studio that I was volunteering at, their place got flooded, so they have to shut down.
Oh,
And
God.
then the horse riding ranch I was at, the owner owed people $30,000 and they just ran away.
Mhm.
So I'm like finding something else to do. And I just so happened that came across Techstars Accelerator for Women Startup Weekend. It's this like amazing 3-day event they throw at different cities where you come on a Friday to pitch a startup idea.
Mhm.
You vote on what idea to work on, you form a team, and then you present your final pitch on Sunday. And that's what got me excited. It's like, oh, I've never tried doing a startup. And like the whole idea about building a scalable business under extreme uncertainties really resonated with me. So I started reading more about startups. And then I learned about the disparity in the whole startup world. Female founders raise only 3% of the total venture capital funds
Mhm.
globally in 2019. And that is just an amazing stat because all these other studies I also read is like startups founded by female founders have better outcome long term.
Mhm.
So I was like just on this, like I kind of went into this whole of like just learning about what startup means, and like the more I read about it, the more like I need to be part of this whole ecosystem. I need to help make a change. I need to be a women founder. And I at that point I was like, I don't really have an idea, but I've joined a pre-seed accelerator called Founder Institute. They're actually the world's largest pre-seed accelerator. You don't actually even need an idea to join it.
Mhm.
What you do is you fill out an online survey, an online personality test. They call it to see if you have the DNA of startup founder. And then you do a fluid intelligence test, which
Right.
is kind of
Mhm.
like pattern recognition. So I passed the test. So that is when I joined in this past March. It's a 14-week program. We started with 26 founders and we are left with 9. I'm actually graduating tomorrow with our final pitch. So I'm super excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But it's been a very interesting journey, just learning about what startup is and what makes startup successful and this whole disparity in like the female founders. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, it sounds like a great idea, and I hope more women do it. I think it's really really interesting. So,
Yeah.
for those people who do not know your work, if you had to pick one most important thing you have achieved during your career, what would it be?
I think the most important thing is I figure out what success mean to me.
Mm-hmm.
I learned very early on that I did not want to climb the corporate ladder.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of forged my own path at a relatively early stage. Like I was basically working remotely since 2003,
Mm-hmm.
when working remotely wasn't even a thing. I mean,
Right.
now
Mm-hmm.
because of COVID-19, obviously, like everyone's talking about and working remotely,
Mm-hmm.
or everyone who's in the tech industry anyway.
But you already know how to do it, so
Yeah.
that's good.
At that point, I think one of my regrets is also that I did not see a lot of women representation at the senior level in technology companies.
Mm-hmm.
Like the only ones that I knew were like either single or divorced,
Right.
honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that has changed a lot in the past few years when like companies are seriously looking at like gender equality, especially in the technology space. I feel like for me, not climbing the corporate ladder, I'm kind of like part of the problem, not the solution.
But you can I just ask you kind of a follow-up question about what you said? So you're saying you're working from home from 2003, right? And you said that you have kids. So how does that work? How did that work for you? Does that like a lot of my colleagues right now are really struggling, I think, and they're saying, oh, when you are the main carer and you also have work responsibilities, it's extremely challenging. So can you maybe give some tips on how to manage work life and the family life when you're working from home? Just maybe a quick advice.
Yeah, definitely, it has been a change since COVID-19. Like before, when I was working from home, the kids were at school,
Oh yeah,
but now
yeah,
they're around 24 out 24/7. The good thing is I have a very good supportive husband.
yeah.
So he helps with like the cooking, the cleaning. So I think that is what's most important in my own like work
So I
life
guess a piece
harmony.
of advice we can give to everyone is get a very good husband that helps you. Well, so that certainly is true for me. I also have a very, very supportive husband.
Yes, I mean like that and we've been married for 18 years now. So
Wow. Yeah.
definitely he helped me succeed in my career. Like even this whole startup thing, I did not know what I was getting myself into. And he's been very supportive. I couldn't have done it honestly if it wasn't COVID-19 because he actually travels a lot for his business. And
Hmm.
because of COVID-19, he stopped his traveling. And that actually gave me lots of support at home that I normally did not have uh,
Hmm.
when he had to travel. So
Yeah. So can you tell us what are you? I mean, you already told us about this the startup, and but can you tell us what are you currently working on? What keeps you awake at night? What makes you excited?
mhm. So as I said, I have two kids.
Yeah.
One is a 6-year-old daughter and a 9-year-old son.
Mm-hmm.
And I see my son naturally inclined at building Legos, and math came easy to him. And math came easy to me when I was growing up. But for my daughter, like I can see that she has struggled at like some math concept that compared to my son at the
Mm-hmm.
same age when he was the same age. So this whole issue of like how do we bring diversity, like help girls better at their STEM, like all these issues, I'm like having a firsthand experience. Like how do I do that? How do I help my daughter? Like I'm actually on the parent council of my children's school here in Ontario, Canada.
Mm-hmm.
We do standardized math and English testing in grade 3 and grade 6.
Mm-hmm.
I was very surprised to learn that girls in grade 6 already showed a lack of confidence in math.
Oh,
Like
wow.
they
Okay.
gave themselves a lower rate at math
Mm-hmm.
compared to how the boys rate themselves. But in fact, the girls performed just as well, if not better, than the boys in actual test scores.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very interesting to me.
Yeah. What
Like
do you
I
think is the
yeah.
underlying reason? Is that the kind of the social constructs that drive them to exhibit such lack of confidence?
That is exactly the question I'm trying to answer to. Like, is it
Okay.
nature
Okay.
or is it nurture? Like, I'm definitely
Okay. I
doing
see.
research on that
Uh-huh.
because for me, right, I grew up in Hong Kong and went to an all girls school. So I'm trying to see like if that is the reason why like I was very confident at math in a young age. Is it because of this like really how society view girls versus boys at a young age in the school system? I
Mm-hmm.
don't have an answer, and I'm hoping one of your readers or even you like have answer for that. Like, but my conclusion right now is that maybe it's like just children develop at different pace, so I should not compare my son and my daughter
Mm-hmm.
like at the same age. And what I'm trying to do is really to offer them and encourage them to explore and give them opportunities to explore.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, we did a piece of research a couple of years ago with colleagues where we compared basically parents who have or expect daughters and who have or expect sons. So that's kind of working with pregnant women, throughout the pregnancy cycle, and also with the partners. And what we found was quite striking is that. Women who expected to have a daughter, and equally the partners of these women, they were a lot less basically prone to risk, so they were risk averse compared to women who expected sons, and the partners of these women as well. So I guess when we partnered on this with people who kind of did evolutional work, and basically these results suggested that even at the level of parenting, you know uh, people who expect daughters tend to be overprotective of daughters. So there's like kind of this social constructs and kind of, I'm not going to say discrimination, but, different attitude towards girls and boys exist even when at the stage when we're, at the stage of pregnancy. It's quite a deeply rooted in our, I guess, social constructs. That's kind of like a very, it doesn't quite answer your question, but like kind of gives some perspective on what might be going on.
No, I think you're absolutely right. And that's very interesting because I just remember one example. It just dawned on me that when my daughter was 5 years old, I was like, I've never bought her a Lego set.
Okay.
Versus my son, like I bought him Legos since he was like age of 2. I think that might have something to do with the fact that she doesn't like playing with Lego even now because she did not start as young as my son did. Like these are definitely like very subconscious thing that I didn't know I was doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So that's the, I guess that's the some of these reasons are probably is in the way we treat children, but also the societal constructs are also very important, and I guess we will talk about them in this podcast. But before we do that, so let's just kind of think again about what you do and in terms of your kind of startup funding career, like new startup funding career.
Yes.
Can you give some tips to people who want to get into startups?
Yes. So definitely what I learned is startup can be a very lonely journey. There's ups and downs. Having a cohort of people and ecosystem to support you definitely helps. That's why if you have the time, I would recommend joining an accelerator where they can provide the guidance and resources and mentorships to help you get started on this journey. The other thing is have a co-founder. If you can find someone that believes in what you're doing, I feel like having a co-founder can help share some of those ups and downs as well.
So that's kind of So we talked about the career, right? And I also want to ask you several questions about women in STEM and diversity and inclusivity. So the first question I have for you is, in your opinion, do we have a lack of women representation in STEM-related sectors? The reason why I asked that question is actually I had a couple of people on this podcast who challenged this idea and said that, well, it depends on kind of the sector. So the first question is, do you think we have a problem with lack of representation of women? And if so, why do you think we have this problem?
Yeah, because I study computer science in university. I think even when I started in the 90s, the ratio at the computer science program was still was pretty good already. It's like 50-50. But I think the problem is once we start working, there's definitely a higher drop off for female leaving the industry versus men. And I do see that it could be a career reason, it could be a family reason. So I do believe there is a gender imbalance in the software tech industry right now. And if you talk about data science, I'm sure you know the set more than I do, like less than 11% of practicing data scientists are female. So I guess to answer your question, yes, I think there's still a lack of balance, gender balance.
Yeah. We just looked at, for example, the female. Well, if you just look at female representation at Fortune 500 companies, you can see that the percentage of women is not that bad. I mean, it's not as bad as it used to be. Like we had none, but also I think. When you dig deeper into these issues, you realize that, for example, in the list that they released this year, there are only, I think, 3 women of color in that in that list. And we couldn't find any, for example, African American women leading large companies. So I guess the question is a lot broader and a lot deeper than just female representation. It's just generally about diversity and inclusivity. Would you agree with that? And in general, what can we do to increase diversity and inclusivity in tech-related industries, in your opinion?
Yeah, I agree with you. I actually lived in Silicon Valley, New York, as well as Cambridge, Massachusetts. For those who don't know, like Cambridge, Massachusetts is where MIT, Harvard campuses are, as well as all the major tech companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft. They all have their East Coast headquarters in Cambridge, Massachusetts for the talent. And what my experience is that there's a huge social disparity in the States in these like high-tech hubs. Like in Silicon Valley, people are literally living in trailers on the street, not too far away from the Google headquarters.
Right.
The school my son went to in Cambridge, Massachusetts, half of the students were living below the poverty line, like receiving subsidies. Like I don't understand, and that is part of the reason why I'm so interested in doing my startup Fairly AI, is look at these biases in society, really. Like for my son's school, we had a Friday backpack program where we literally put food into students' backpacks so they would have something to eat over the weekend. But at the same time, I know that a new grad in computer science starts with $100,000 salary in Silicon Valley, in Cambridge. So how can that happen in America, one of the most prosperous country in the world? And that's why when I decided to move back to Canada, to be honest with you, it was like, I can't deal with the disparity. But now that I'm back in Canada and seeing what Canada's doing right, and we're definitely still like, there are areas that we can definitely improve. Like education system is definitely where I feel like we can start young to help some of these students learn about STEM, prepare them for a tech career. And that's one of the best way to basically grow out of this social economic status to go into the tech world. Because a lot of these parents, here's another example. Have you heard of Hour of Code?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I used to volunteer for Hour of Code at my son's school in Cambridge.
Yeah, but maybe you could, Fion, maybe you could explain to the listeners what it is. Yes, that'd be great.
Okay, so once a year, volunteers around the world volunteer their time to go to local schools where they live to teach kids an hour of code. And it starts as young as in kindergarten. Like for kindergarten, they do some like exercises that are related to how code work. And it's a very fun activity. For me, like my first experience was that a lot of these kids that I worked with, it was their first time using a computer. They don't have internet at home. They don't know what a mouse is. I still remember how excited they were using a computer for the first time. Like these are opportunities that I think a lot of us who are more fortunate don't really think about. Like my kids was on a device since like age 1, you know. So I feel like that's like where the whole disparity of the tech industry really have to address and start. Is like really at kindergarten level, like when some kids are already ahead because of like their parents and the resources their parents are willing to provide.
Yeah. So I guess, and kind of coming back to your previous example, I guess we should buy our daughters Legos and tools that they could really use to develop their skills and start from early age. That's a great idea. Thank you so much. So this is we came to the end of the questions, and I usually. When I ask this question, everybody complains. All guests complain about it. So I'm going to ask it anyway. And the question goes like this. If I asked you to recommend one book and one film, what would your recommendations be? The reason why people usually complain is because I ask them to just stick to kind of just pick one of each. So, and if you read more than one book, I guess that's that's difficult. But yeah, if you could provide some recommendations for our listeners, it doesn't have to be a startup book, doesn't have to be a data science book or AI book, but just something that inspires you, something that you come back to maybe on a regular basis.
Yeah. So the most inspiring book that I read recently is called Restoring the Soul of Business, Staying Human in the Age of Data by Richard Tobaccowala. He's named one of the world's top 5 marketing innovators by Time. If you search on YouTube, he does talks at like all the major tech companies like Google, Twitter. So his idea is that data is going to be like electricity in 5 years. It's not going to give companies their competitive advantage. What companies need to do is going back to finding the purpose and passion in their employees. So I think he's on the right track, because on a lot of the client projects I work on right now, it's just so data driven. And I know you're a data scientist, so but it's just so data driven that we kind of lost the point. It's like, why are we only sticking to these metrics when like there are all these other things that we should consider that are not so like, that's not just about data, right?
Right, exactly. And it needs to be like you pointed out at the beginning of the podcast, and several people who were on this podcast pointed out that the data science is a tool to solve problems, right? And we should always keep the purpose in mind, that it's all we're doing all these things in order to solve an important problem, whatever that problem is. Is it a business problem or social problem? Like, for example, diversity and inclusivity problem could be solved, or at least the data science could help solve it. But we should always remember that it's a tool to solve a problem. It's not some sort of witchcraft, and we're not magicians. We're just doing something useful. And how about the film?
So I'll have to choose Frozen 2.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you watch it, but I love the idea of Elsa pushing herself into the unknown. And I totally identify with that, because I'm doing a startup and there's just so much uncertainty. Plus, it's the most recent movie I watched with my kids. So.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Fion, thank you so much for your time today, and thank you for sharing your ideas. And I just want to wish you good luck with your startup. And I just would like to see more things from you. And I know that you were planning to retire, but then you decided not to. So hopefully we will see more amazing work that you produce. And I hope your startup will pick up and will be successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was very fun.